Hey everyone, today I'll be presenting a recent study by Chacon and Pilkinen from 2025. This study investigates how the brain processes long distance relationships between words in sentences, especially in structures that we call filler gap dependencies. Now, our brain is constantly predicting upcoming words when we try to understand language. For example, when we see the sentence, the student read the, most people would expect book to finish the sentence. However, if the brain encounters an unexpected word, such as the student read the cat, it produces a response called the N400 or the M350 in the MEG, about 400 milliseconds after the word appears. However, from past data, it is unclear whether the response reflects true sentence prediction or just simple word associations like doctor and hospital are associated. Now, this particular study aims to separate prediction from simple word association. Now, what is a filler gap dependency? Now, in the English language, the regular sentence structure goes from subject to verb to object. For example, the student cleaned the floor. However, in a filler gap sentence, we say, which floor did the student clean? So the object, which floor, moved to the beginning of the sentence. Now, this moved phrase we call the filler, and the missing gap after and the missing position after the verb clean we call the gap. Now, the brain must remember the filler, which floor, and connect it to the verb later on, making these sentences useful for studying long-distance language processing. For this study, there was 30 native English speakers. In the study, they used MEG, which is basically records magnetic neural activity, magnetic waves from your brain. It has very good spatial resolution, so it knows where exactly the response is originating from in the brain. The study uses a 3x2 design, so there's 3 types of sentences, and each sentence has a further 2 types of either plausible or implausible. Now, importantly, the researchers control for word association, so any brain differences that would be a product would reflect how brain evaluates sentence meaning, and not just word association, as in not just how often these words occur together. Now, 3 types of sentences are: number 1, the yes and no, which is the control; number 2, the W subject; number 3, W object. The W subject, if we see, the verb and the object are right next to each other. However, the main manipulation in the W object, which is also the filler gap dependency, is that the object and the verb are much further apart. For example, which counters and then clean is right towards the end of the sentence. So the participant must remember the object and connect it to the verb later on. This is the key manipulation. Now, the results show that the brain response is differed by the sentence type. So for the first 2 sentences, the yes and no and the W subject, the brain response for the implausible sentence comes earlier on. So starting from 200 all the way to 568 milliseconds, and it appears specifically in the left inferior frontal cortex. However, for the main manipulation, the filler gap dependency, W object condition, the brain response occurs 600 to 800 milliseconds after verb onset, and also on the right side of the brain, so the right inferior frontal cortex. Now, this is a figure directly from the paper. So panel C shows us the timing. So the implausible plausible N400 or M350 response occurs the earliest, and the W object one, it occurs the latest. And in panel D, we see that this is recorded from the MEG, so we see that most brain activity is on the right side of the brain for W object. Just to help understand, the y-axis shows us the types of sentences, and within each condition we can see the responses. Now, the implications and interpretation is that there's basically 2 models. Number 1, the predict and verify model, which says that the brain predicts the verb using the earlier noun, the object. If the prediction is wrong, the brain should detect it early. The results do not support this. However, the results support the results support a retrieve then interpret model, which means the brain retrieves the earlier noun, which is the object, after it sees the verb. And this is explained by the late response that we see. The study also looked at human predictions compared to GPT-2 predictions. Human predictions actually match brain activity much better, suggesting that humans use deeper sentence structure when processing language. Now, for this assignment, I read and analyzed the original research, looking at the methods, results, conclusions. I did some highlighting. I organized the presentation around the 4 rubric components. I simplified my wording, and I also used Claude AI for brainstorming, clarifying confusing concepts, but all interpretation and synthesis is my own. Thank you.